What's going on, everyone? My name's Eric, and today on the channel we're going to be going down the Dimebag tone rabbit hole again. And if you couldn't tell already, we're going to be going into the cabinets and specifically the speakers that are going to really get you that Dimebag tone. In my opinion, this is like the biggest piece of the puzzle, and this is the one that's going to make the biggest difference in terms of you getting the Dimebag sound. And later on in this video, I'm going to show you how important the speaker and the cabinet is in terms of shaping your sound and even just changing your sound in general and kind of getting a bit more bang for your buck instead of having to go out and buy a ton of different amplifiers just to kind of chase that sound that you're after. So with all that being said, let's dive into today's video. Alright, and as you can see here, we have the Randall cab in today's video here. I'm going to get a couple close-ups for you just so you can see that this cab has basically lived a very dynamic life. It's been around the block a few times just from all the battle scars on this, but fortunately all the internals work and everything like that. So if you do see a used cabinet and you do really want it, just really consider that you might be able to actually save a good amount of money by buying a cabinet that's kind of in not the hottest condition. Just make sure you test everything and make sure all the electronics and all the speakers work on the inside of that. And the whole reason I honestly bought this cab is because I saw this on Facebook Marketplace for like a ridiculously low price. And then I thought to myself, what are the chances it has the speakers that I'm looking for? And if you're really keen, you would know that I'm talking about those Randall Jaguar speakers. And in case you don't know, those Randall Jaguar speakers were used by Dimebag for all of his rhythm guitar tones for all the recordings in Pantera. And he used all these old vintage Randall cabinets live as well. So if you went to a Pantera show in the 90s, you would have definitely heard the Randall Jaguar speakers. And luckily enough for me, the seller actually took the cabinet apart and actually got a couple pictures of the speakers. And lo and behold, they're Randall Jaguars, and specifically they're the RES 80 speakers, so they're the 80-watt Jaguar speakers, and apparently these are the exact same speakers that Dimebag used on pretty well all of the Pantera main rhythm tones. There's been a lot of debate online whether Dimebag actually used the 80-watt speakers or the 100-watt Randall Jaguar speakers. So I'm going to pass this on to Grady Champion, who was Dimebag's guitar tech through the entire Pantera days. So if you remember or if you know, just to clear the air, if Dimebag was either using the 80-watt or the 100-watt Randall Jaguar speakers, just to help us out, and especially those who are still trying to chase that Dimebag sound. Much appreciated. But as soon as I saw that these speakers were in fact Randall Jaguar speakers, I knew I had to have this cabinet, especially at the price that it was listed at. So I immediately messaged him back just saying like, hey, does this cab work? Speakers are good and everything. And he's like, yeah, sounds good. And I just went out and grabbed it, and a little foolishly of me, I didn't really ask to, hear any sound clips or anything. So keep that in mind if you are looking to buy like a used cab or a used amp or anything like that. Just make sure you get some video footage before you actually make a trip out to, go check out a piece of gear or something like that. So I went to the seller's place, picked it up, drove back and everything like that, plugged it in, and no sound, which was a bit of a scary thing. So I took all the speakers out of the cab and I individually tested each speakers to then actually see if there was signal passing through. There's a few ways that you can do it. The one way that I did was essentially hooked up my Seymour Duncan power stage and just kind of jumped the speaker cable going out from the Seymour Duncan power stage to a jack and going right onto the positive and the negative terminals on each of the speakers. Just tapped the cable that was going into the Seymour Duncan power stage, and I was hearing signal pass through. Did that for all 4 speakers, and that was a sure shot that all the speakers were working. Another way you can test your speakers to see if they're working or not is actually hooking up a multimeter to the positive and the negative terminals of the speaker as well. Setting the multimeter to the ohms section, and then you're going to hear a little bit of scratchy noise that comes through the speakers if they are working, which basically tells you that there is signal passing through, and then the speaker is simply amplifying that signal. And even then, once I was pulling the speakers out of this cabinet here, I noticed some of the actual speaker terminals were disconnected, so some of the speakers actually weren't getting signal. And in just basic electricity, if one part of the circuit is not going to get signal, the rest of it is not going to get signal depending on how it is wired. So in this case, if I caught that a little bit earlier, I could have saved myself a little bit of time. And the one thing that was really sketchy about this whole thing, once I actually opened up the cabinet and everything, despite kind of like the old musty smell that smells like your grandparents' furniture, was this kind of wiring here. Yeah, I don't know, this looks pretty shot. I just don't trust masking tape and all these different parts like kind of electric taped together, and I
don't trust like that.
What I'm gonna do is actually rewire this whole cabinet. There's a few ways that you can rewire a cabinet. It's pretty easy. Like, you can follow a diagram, and if you could basically solder from one point to another, or actually use some of these little clips here to actually connect these speakers together. And that's just to keep everything looking nice and tidy. So I'm gonna rewire the cabinet, get rid of the shot wiring, and then we're gonna plug an amp in and hear these Randall Jaguars rip. Here we go. All right, now I got the Randall cab all wired up here, and now we're gonna hear how this thing sounds in a couple isolated demos. I'm only going to be using one guitar for this demo, and that's gonna be my Washburn Culprit. It has a Bill Lawrence XL500 in the bridge, as all Dimebag guitars pretty well should have. That's gonna go straight into my Dimebag pedalboard rig, and that's gonna go into a Seymour Duncan power stage. Real simple signal chain. That's gonna be like a modern recreation of the original gear that Daryl used, and if you wanna learn more about that, I have another video on my channel that you can check out after this one. I also wanna bring in my 5150 Iconic because That is just a traditional tube amp. It's a readily available one. It's under $1,000 and it sounds fantastic. But I also want to bring that into the equation because when you boost a regular tube amp or just any sort of tube amp that's not related to Dimebag Darrell whatsoever, you're going to be really surprised of how well this cabinet kind of turns any sort of guitar amplifier that you throw through it into like a really close Dimebag Darrell guitar tone, just for those people who are maybe a little bit more budget focused, who really don't have the expendable income to throw on a modern recreation of Dimebag's rig that maybe I threw together with that pedalboard rig, or chase down the original air correct gear that Darrell used throughout his time in Pantera. So with all that being said, let's hear the Randall Jaguar compared to a few other guitar cabs and speakers as well. Alright, now that was the Randall Jaguar cab and speaker compared to some of my other favorite cabs in my collection, also trying to chase that Dimebag sound, just as well as throwing in a different amplifier there that is not really related to Dimebag in any way, shape, or form, just to show you that if you don't have like a Dimebag Darrell specific rig, that you can still get some pretty awesome Dimebag related tones by using a different amplifier into like a Randall Jaguar speaker and anything like that, and you will get really close. Like, you don't really have to go down the rabbit hole if your budget doesn't really allow for it, and that's kind of what I wanted to showcase by throwing the 5150 in there. And with all that being said, like, I am so impressed with the Randall Jaguar speakers, and what I really got from these speakers is that they're very unique speakers, and they're kind of an anomaly. Now, listening back to the Randall Jaguar speakers in the room on their own, I really felt like I was capturing that live Dimebag sound, you know, especially from the 90s bootleg recordings or even live 101. I really felt like in the room, like that cabinet and those speakers really just get that raw, aggressive, and super articulate and clear sound that Dimebag Darrell is really known for. And even with the guitar cabinet mic'd up, it just sounded like Cowboys from Hell right there, which was like kind of mind-blowing because I really didn't do a lot of work to really get it there. And even though listening to all those studio albums, like, there's a ton of processing, layering, and, you know, double tracking and mic placement and mics and all that, it still really got there with just like an SM57 and not a lot of extra post-processing to really get it there. And after jogging my memory online with a little bit of extra reading, there's a few people who were saying that maybe these were like a take on a vintage 30 made by Eminence or something like that. And in my opinion, these do sound way different than the vintage 30. I have tried the Eminence Legend because the Eminence Legend is Eminence's current take on a vintage 30, and that actually sounds pretty different than the vintage 30 as well. And it seems like the Eminence Legend actually sounds pretty similar, or actually a little bit closer to this speaker than the vintage 30 does. So hard to say. There's not a ton of information. Basically, people say these things sound great, and obviously they do sound great. And from my own research, there wasn't a ton of information on these. Like, you could see speaker graphs and see like the EQ curve on these and everything, but in terms of like who actually made the Randall Jaguar speaker and if it was supposed to copy something or anything, there's not a lot of knowledge on that. So if you're watching this video and you were actually a part of that production team that made the Randall Jaguar, whether you worked for Randall, you worked for Eminence or Celestine or whoever made these things, please let us know in the comments. It would be so awesome to hear from you, especially if you have some information based on these speakers, since there's a lot of people who want to learn a little bit more about these speakers. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for these Randall Jaguar speakers, like, these things are pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie. And obviously I'm a big Pantera and like Dimebag fan, you know, I love the tone and everything, and like that's a big part of the channel. Honestly, like, thinking outside of that lens, like, these speakers are really sick, and I honestly just had a joy playing through them. So I think these speakers can really lend themselves to other genres and styles as well. They're super articulate, and they really cut through in the mix. Now, if you are a tone chaser and you like having a collection of gear and, you know, amps and cabinets to pick from, I think the Randall Jaguar cabinet and speaker would be a great addition to your studio, pending you can get it at a great price. A lot of the Dimebag related gear is a little expensive at the time of filming this, so keep that in mind, especially if this is a piece of gear that's going to be sitting more than it's actually getting used. And once again, just to circle back, I feel like the cab is the biggest part of the overall tone shaping and the tone chasing, especially if you're trying to chase Dimebag sound. Parametric EQ, the 6-band EQ up front, rail pickups, and the Randall head, all of those pieces do matter, but the biggest difference that you're going to hear in your tone if you're chasing the Dimebag sound is grabbing that Jaguar speaker. And with all that being said, thanks for checking out this video. If you learned something new and if you like certain parts of the video, make sure you leave a comment down below, especially if you love those Randall Jaguar speakers, or if you heard of another speaker that sounds really similar to these kinds of speakers. If you like the video, make sure you leave a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. I have tons more Pantera and Dimebag related videos on the channel as well. And if you really love what I do, make sure you hit that notification bell so you do not miss a single video that I upload. Thanks for checking this out, and I'll see you next time.